some years ago, and we can have his quotations, that without reforms inside of EU, there will be no possibility of future enlargement for including new members into EU institutions. And when we are speaking about, trio, there are a lot of experts, both in Brussels and in Berlin, in Western Balkan countries, from different think tanks, who are speaking very similar things now about Western Balkans. And they are saying that even Western Balkans will not have a possibility to become members of EU, despite all the political promises of EU institutions. That is reality, which we need to face. Then really, what we need to see, again, in a very clear colors and clear light. If nothing will change, in EU policy towards neighborhood, it can happen that nothing will change with Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine integration. You will keep asking, membership perspective, and you will keep getting the same answers from institutions. Make the reforms, and then EU institutions will decide. That is what we can, make very short, conclusion about the last 10 years, how things were going. And usually the whole discussion was about one vote in Eastern Partnership Summit Declaration to mention membership or not to mention, and that's all. And from my point of view, it's simply kicking the can down the road. What we see, during the last years, on that topic, and it frustrates both trio countries and, politicians, at least some politicians inside of EU. And without much more clear perspective from EU side, what is next big on integration road? Motivation for reforms in trio countries will start to erode, and I see some evidence of that even now. Political polarization will be increasing, and less attention will be paid for real integration issues. And we can just guess how this erosion of motivation will look like if it will continue in the same way for next 10 years. So that is why we hope that Eastern Partnership Summit will look not only into some kind of, technical stuff, technical details, which are important, so-called deliverables, maybe, roaming will be decided. But we hope that EAP Summit also will have possibility to look more deeply into what is needed to be changed with trio integration philosophy from EU side. Our proposal, which we put into our paper, I quoted the title, is very simple. If for trio countries there is no realistic perspective to get from EU clear and ambitious full membership perspective, let's push for some intermediate, but realistic status, which would allow trio countries to get majority of the benefits of full membership, but also would allow to avoid the stumbling question about integration into institutions. And this is exactly where we need to bring back Romano Prodi formula from 2002. We are quoting that formula quite extensively in our memo. And Romano Prodi was speaking about possibility of EU neighborhood countries, some kind of formula, possibility of getting everything but institutions. That was his formula. We can call it, if we shall look more deeply in more detail, we can call it, whatever, Norwegian model of the membership in European economic area, or, model of full integration into single market and four freedoms. In all the cases, it means the same, despite how we shall call it. In spring, we were trying to call it anti-chamber model. That, from Roma, imperial times. Anti-chamber is something before the entering the chamber. So in all cases, it means the same: full economical integration into single market, more than 70% of acquis. That's what it means, and of course, functioning democracy and rule of law system, and all the benefits from that economical integration. What some experts are quoting, exactly trying to convince Western Balkans to move into that direction. They are quoting one statistical number, which I liked very much. Lithuania GDP per capita in PPP terms before joining EU in 1999 was 36%, if you compare with EU average. Now we are approaching 85%. So that is, the benefit of economical integration. The question of participating in EU institutions can be postponed for later period of time. And there are proposals from some think tanks from Brussels, how to make it progressive and unconditional. I mean, integration into institutions. But that's perhaps it's too early to start to speak about that more deeply. Such an integration into single market and four freedoms can be fully realized during the next decade, or even maybe during shorter period of time. What is needed to be done by both sides, EU on one side and Trio or Georgia, is very clear. Look on Norwegian Foreign Ministry website. Perhaps it's possible also to find the same information on different websites, but Norwegian Foreign Ministry really gives good information. Was they explain in detail what kind of legal acts you need to adopt in order really to move into that direction. There are 22 areas which are covered by single market legislation, and it's really possible to do it. The goal to achieve this intermediate status does not preclude later goal to go for full membership. That is what Austria, Sweden, and Finland did. You know that Norway in their referendum, because of, I don't know, of oil or fish, whatever, reasons they decided not to move into full membership, but that's their decision. For time being, it's very important to find a way how to move forward from that impasse of trio integration, which we are witnessing for the last 10 years. That's my major point. Let's find a way how to get out from this impasse. The biggest danger for such a country like Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova is to stay in that impasse for next 10 years, kicking the can, from both sides and not moving forward. So I would really urge both EU institutions and national governments of Trio, including Georgian government, to stop kicking the can and to really move this integration into intermediate status. 70% of integration, of course, is less than 100% of full membership, but it's much more of 0% what we still have now. It's possible to do it. In our paper, really, we are trying to describe the whole process in more detailed way, how to change also the process, because there are benefits not only, which you will get at the end of the process with integration into the market, into single market, but also there are what we call process benefits, because we need to have much more proactive EU participation in those, in that process with annual reports, reviews, and so on, which is possible to be done. We need perhaps also to follow some Western Balkans experience with creation of special coalition inside of EU, which for Western Balkans, it has a title Berlin Process. But Berlin Process, first of all, started with creation of coalition. We can look how to create some kind of trio coalition inside of EU also in order to move forward. But again and again, I will conclude with repeating my very simple logic. First of all, let's move forward from impasse of today, because if that will keep going on in the same way, all of us will lose at the end. And both sides, Georgian governments needs to move forward, but also EU needs to move forward, and that's possible. So I don't know if Ramūnas will join me and will say a few words, but I conclude here.
Sure, Ramūnas. I think you can go ahead, and I just wanted to say that it looks like integration by stealth, as mentioned by several experts of the European integration issues. But I think this is very important, and in that sense, probably if you could allude some more things about this document, which is, I think, may not, as I know, some Georgians may not be happy. I mean, who are maximalists, but I think this is, I would say, kind of more realistic, especially taking into consideration what are the moods in EU right now, and also taking into consideration what are the situation in the region. So, Ramūnas, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Korneli. I'll be very brief, because Andrius quite extensively went through the different parts of the paper. What we have currently now in Georgia, not only in Georgia, in Ukraine or Moldova, these countries have no target, and furthermore, they have no map. They are left, they are parked somewhere in a nice lot, and what we're suggesting with this paper, that we need finally to build the rails, to start the process, to show the direction, to show the map where are you and what exactly your situation now and how we can address it, how we can, build concrete step-by-step measures. So that what exactly is our paper about. Even within the association countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, we see there is an uneven progress from the EU engagement point of view. For example, Ukraine has this support group for Ukraine mechanism with a huge engagement on reform support, on different programs, from finances to small and medium enterprises, public administration, justice reform. This is not yet in Georgia. So exactly, we are trying to group you together, as a single block where EU could fine-tune its policies and to reflect better those aspirations which are shared by the association countries. Then coming further to the comprehensive approach we emphasized in our proposal. Exactly, we would like to see this EU map fully covering all the EU key areas. That's where, then we can better understand where are you. Because now we have kind of a selective engagement with you, other association countries. We don't see exactly, the location. We don't have the point of reference for Georgia, neither Armenia or Ukraine, Moldova, where you can advance and how you can come forward. Then, of course, we have methodology matters. Currently, we are not EU is not very much rich with methodology approach. As the association process is more kind of a forum exchange of views on different progress made. But nevertheless, even within the association process, we lack the methodology to assess you. The EU cannot see, where are you on this trajectory. Are you 20% ready? Are you 40% ready? Or are you 80% ready? There are different speculations and different time lapses, when you can be ready. But that's not enough. EU is not ready from methodology point of view. Then, of course, formula, project formula, and Western Balkan methodology on so-called cluster approach, where you can opt into kind of a accelerated integration, would be very useful and helpful in that case. Then, of course, we move to the monitoring progress I mentioned before. Association process is not involved the assessment as such. It only constitutes progress made or lack of progress in some areas, but it has no assessment on where you are. And that's why we need to have those regular reports with analysis, with comparisons, which helped a lot Lithuania at our time. When we saw our progress, we compared it with the Estonians, we compared with Poland, and then we understood where we are in this huge regatta thing. Then, of course, everything is done, what we try to emphasize here in Brussels, everything is done for the sake of reforms in Georgia. Even the EU accession is an instrument for you to advance your own country, to rise up with economy, with regulation, with institutions, with budgetary financial control. All this, the primary purpose of that. EU accession is an instrument. And that's where, as Andrius rightly noted, that's where you can avoid political polarization. That's where you can have a national unity for EU integration agenda. But only when EU is ready with the framework for you, when EU is ready with the methodology for you, when EU is ready with the clear, objectives which are set for you, only then, we can count that also Georgia will be ready with its, agreement among all for the political forces to go forward. And that's where your aspirations, your final accession date of 2024, when you can fill the application, for example, for accession later, could be also very much instrumental for you to mobilize the process. But that cannot be done while you not those prerequisites from the EU, which also stops you from agreeing domestically. So basically, I will stop you here. And this is basically a call for EU also to take part of its responsibility, of its strategic responsibility for Georgia, for association countries, and for Eastern Partnership in general.
Thank you, Ramonas, for very interesting, presentation. Before I turn to our attendees, I would just ask them to remind them to raise their hands if they have questions, because we're now moving to Q&A session. And just before that, I would like to actually agree with Ramonas that I think this is very important to have some sort of green light from EU side and some sort of interest for these three countries, because now what we see, it looks like these three countries look like a kind of, I would say, strategic orphans in this part of the world. And I think we really need some sort of engagement and much more clear signals from European Union. And as you mentioned, it can be even solution, not kind of like final solution for this polarization, but especially if we have some sort of incentives from EU and there will be some perspective, I'm sure this maybe also could be helpful also for internal struggle which we have in this country. Having said that, I would like also already to invite, I can see that Nino Belashvili has raised hand. So, please, we should try to make a very short question, because there are some other journalists as well. So please, Nino, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction and for your presentation. Hello, everybody. My question is, actually, when a country like Georgia has so many challenges and in every sphere, there are two choices for the partners. Either partners stubbornly help it to progress, or you leave it alone. As I understand, leaving Georgia alone in current circumstances is not in the interests of the Western partners either. So my question is, how do you see the process, the mechanism of this idea of intermediate status issue gaining support of the EU leaders? As I understand, you introduced this idea, this way of further integration of these three countries in the context of the Eastern Partnership Summit. Do you have any special goals for that? Thank you very much.
Well, very briefly, definitely we don't want to leave, Georgia on its own. And since really, the neighborhood is very important, the processes which are going on in the neighborhood of EU are important not only for the countries but also for EU and for further neighborhood, and so on and so on. So we passed recently, for example, so-called report in European Parliament on EU policy towards Russia, where we spoke also about Eastern Partnership and exactly about the same, model, that let's move from that impasse in order really to show the success of trio countries. And the success from our point of view is possible to be created only through integration process. And that success can be, very important really in showing, Russian people what can be achieved. That's also why we see it in a much broader, from broader perspective. Now on what can happen in Eastern Partnership Summit, still we are not so sure. We are just getting declaration. What we hear from Commission, they would like to talk again and again, the same language about some economical benefits, which are important, of course. Some technical stuff, again important, but not looking more deeply into what they call enlargement philosophy. And that is where we need to really to build a coalition of like-minded people, both from trio countries, from EU countries. In European Parliament, for example, last year, a special report on the future of Eastern Partnership was passed, because he was thinking that summit will be last year, but pandemic postponed it. And in that report, again, maybe not in such a consolidated way, but again, there is a lot of language about economical integration, about, four freedoms, about single market integration, and so on and so on. So we need to push. That's my. We need to push through EU institutions, some kind of those ideas and that logic. Yeah, Nina wants additional question.
Just, first I forgot to introduce myself. I represent Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty Georgian service. I'm sorry for that. And my question is, when you say coalition, and when you say we have to push, who are you? I mean, inside the EU. Thank you. Excuse me.
Yeah. Well, besides being simply a politician for 30 years, in politics, in European Parliament, I am leading so-called Euronest, delegation from European Parliament to Euronest Parliamentary Assembly, which is responsible for all Eastern Partnership, issues. So that's my one responsibility. Second, I am also standing rapporteur on Russia. And when I'm talking about Russia, I cannot avoid, issues related with Eastern Partnership countries. Since from my point of view, really, we need to see from holistical point of view, all the developments in eastern part of European continent as in some way, interconnected. And democracy slowly but is spreading. Georgia was among the first countries, then Ukraine, then Armenia, Moldova changed. Now we see struggles in Belarus, and we are hopeful also about future of Russia.
Thank you. I see the Sophie Vardiashvili. If you could introduce yourself and please go ahead. Sophie, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Okay, since there's a technical problem, I would like also to ask you one question before the other attendees will raise their hands. You mentioned that there might be some sort of chances for grand coalition to push for this kind of ideas. And what's your sense? What are the moods in Brussels right now when you were discussing this idea? Actually, do you see some sort of opposition to this idea? Do you see some signals, maybe not so strong and weak, but especially for heavyweighters? So what kind of mood we have? Sophie, did you manage to solve your problem? Okay, I think you should go ahead and then.
Yeah, very good question. I see really, something wrong. I see it as still quite an initial stage. We're trying to push, trio issues out from that, situation which we saw during several last years, to push EU to have more ambitious strategy. It will take time. But what is interesting also that very similar, I said perhaps in my introduction, that very similar mood we see among experts who are really much more deeply involved into Western Balkans. They are speaking very similar language. And since Western Balkans are much more on the agenda of EU, if you will listen to Commission President, or commissioners, they always are speaking about how important are Western Balkans, and if integration will not go, then Russia or Turkey will come in, and will destabilize, the whole region, which from my point of view is the same as we could speak about, trio region. But if in Western Balkans there is, because of very different, reasons, the process also is not moving. And ideas and proposals are more and more coming out, how to push for similar paths for intermediate status, for economic integration. Then it can open, also some kind of, new possibilities to speak the same about trio. And exactly, we see that there is some interest in that language, about Western Balkans and perhaps about trio in Paris, in Madrid. At least we are reported. We are looking how we shall, in the nearest future, how to engage with them with a new coalition in Berlin and with the forthcoming, presidency of France. France is, also moving into presidential elections, which will mean that maybe President Macron will look for some kind of new big or grand ideas, how he likes to speak about, So things are still not very clear, not very much decided, but I see really that simply we need to move forward. we need to collect at least, the initial group of, what we can call coalition of like-minded people from also from trio countries, from Georgia. Next week we are going to Ukraine to speak with them. Moldova is also, very close to us. Moldova can be, and that is what Georgians need to know, that among EU institutions there is a wish really to show some kind of even differentiation inside of trio, and to show that Moldova with a new government, new, political establishment, is really much more closer towards EU institutions than, for example, Georgia with its own problems, or Ukraine with always is big, complicated and difficult to move. So that's also can come in some other way onto agenda.
Okay, thank you. I see that there's two raised hands. Maybe first I will ask Ms. Tamar Kulurdava, actually, who was, her probably, I'm sure. She was the chairperson of the European Integration Committee of Georgian Parliament. So if she could comment, and then afterwards I would like to ask Ina Tsartsidze, and so Ina can introduce later. So Tamar, the floor is yours, please.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone. And it's great to see the faces of friends and to hear you, Mr. Kubilius. I cannot help myself but start by thanking you for actually being always the generator of these ideas and pushing it from the EU, because as you say also in the paper, we are stuck in one and the same place for all too long. And it looks like a childish stubbornness already, where one side demands to be a member without actually, let's face it, without actually performing in the best way possible, at least. And on the other side, we have this reluctance and indifference and fatigue from the EU side. And of course, this ambition is not taken in the best way because of the fact that we are underperforming, if you ask me. In our situation, obviously, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to overperform, to overprove your case, to demonstrate at every step that you are doing it right, that you deserve it. And I think that is the best argument that could possibly, potentially win the hearts and minds of, the governments of the EU member states. Although that is, of course, easier said than done, I realize that, but that would be the first step. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening now, but that is a different issue. We are very grateful that you are thinking also outside this potential membership, which I believe you think that is not coming and is not something, the perspective is not something we should expect in the near future. And of course, we should think of other options, because something is better than nothing, and 70%, as you said, is definitely much better than 0%. However, we have been discussing these ideas, this potential of full economic integration, this potential of being part of the EEA, which you can be if you are a member of EFTA or the member of the EU. We are not member of the EU. EFTA is a rich countries club, as we all know. It's the place where you have, Norway and Liechtenstein and Iceland and Switzerland sitting, and, finding a place for countries such as Georgia might also not be very, very realistic. However, if this idea, and we have worked on that also from the Georgian side, we have tested the ground, we have talked to the people and seen whether this would be possible or not. What you are suggesting sounds very good to me. I would, full-heartedly support the idea. It's just that, knowing the, or having been exposed to some of the reactions from the member states, I think that would also be very, very difficult, even if we are not talking about the political decision or the political integration, which would be beyond what you are suggesting. But whatever we can do to get something new on the table, if you think that is realistic, I think you should have full support from the Georgian side, Georgian authorities side. I hope that this initiative will be sufficiently appreciated, picked up and supported and pushed from the trio side, not only from Georgia's side, but all the three countries. Of course, we shouldn't say no to our overall ambition, which still should lie ahead, but we should get whatever we can in the meantime. And as you say, without having a clear orientation and clear knowledge of where we are going, it's very difficult to sustain reforms and to sustain our efforts on the right path. And we are losing that, and we see that because people are getting tired. And if you ask me, mentioning European integration in Georgia is already becoming a little bit toxic word because people are a little bit taken aback by mentioning it so often. Not because we don't want to integrate in the EU, but more and more it is seen as something which will never be materialized. And therefore, putting something new on the table will benefit the situation, will heal the situation on the Georgian side, and will hopefully enable us to consolidate our efforts for reforms. We have very good example of visa liberalization, and it has been mentioned too often. I don't want to repeat it, but I mean, it is clear, it is an example. It was difficult to achieve. We had certain, very clear commitments to meet, certain reforms to undertake, laws to adopt, which were not easy to adopt in the Georgian patriarchal context, but they were done because there was a clear, thing in the end that Georgia was supposed to get. It was a, political decision was made, and then it was a technical process after that, which Georgia had to fulfill, and it helped us to consolidate all the efforts from everybody and to get where we wanted to be. So that's why it is important to have the strategic vision from the EU side, of course, without undermining the importance of us getting our act together and performing better. Thank you very much for the initiative and for this possibility to contribute to this discussion.
Well, yeah, thanks a lot, Tamara. Really, it's a pleasure to see you that you are, engaged into European issues despite all political, how to say, decisions or steps what you were forced to make. Really, I remember our cooperation in a very, very important time, and I think that ideas on trio, which we put on paper during Euronest parliamentary session in Tbilisi, they are really very important, and we put them together. And now I agree absolutely that Georgia and all other, trio countries should, behave in this, over-performing mode. I don't know how to convince, but yeah, I am always repeating the same, that at the very beginning we also, we're going into all EU institutions just to complain that we are, we are special, we are weak, we are whatever, And then when somebody from the EU institution said me that you should go to Red Cross, to ask humanitarian assistance, not to EU, if you are complaining so much about your own country, I understood that really we need to change our logic. And that would be my also advice to Georgian politicians, to go to Brussels, both sides, not to complain and not to, much more, not to try to convince that they are right and others are wrong, which is, for time being, it's quite an intensive, performance, but really to show that Georgia is able to move. Now, I understand, very well that perhaps on our road towards this, European Economic Area, whatever membership, we need to be also inventive. European Economic Area is really, consists of rich countries. And I am not so sure that Norwegians or Swiss would be, or Iceland, would be very happy when Georgia will start to knock the door now and will say, well, allow us to come in. But that's possible to resolve. It can be a special economic area of those countries which are, coming from Eastern Partnership or from Western Balkans, and that's all. You simply were taking the same, the same model, the same, arrangement, but we are not pretending maybe to be together with Norway and Switzerland. That would be a solution.
Yep. So we have Ines Arcita, and then we will turn to Sophie.
Hello, do you hear me? Well, hello everyone. Let me introduce myself. I'm a journalist from Israeli TV channel Israeli. Mr. Kubilius, I've got a question for you. I would love to ask you about Mikhail Saakashvili. I know it's a little bit different question, different topic from the topic we were talking about during this meeting, but it is very important to know your position about Saakashvili. And I want to talk about the open letters that 70 European Parliament some politicians and you signed as well, Mikhail Saakashvili, to get free. It was a very severe answer from the ruling party about this topic, about this open letter. Mikhail Saakashvili and the Prime Minister also said, I will cite you to be more specific. Someone from European Parliament comes out with a wise phrase, gives us wise advice. No one can stand against the enforcement of justice, no matter how many members of the European Parliament comes out. So what's going to be your answer, and why do you think that the ex-president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, to be free? Thank you.
Well, I would not try to elaborate too much because we made different statements on that topic, and in really, in some way, we would be very happy to see that political crisis in Georgia is over, because I remember again our assembly in Tbilisi in 2018, and that was the first time when I was, involved into discussion with both opposition and ruling party, on that crisis. And then, March agreement last year, April agreement this year, and in some cases we are becoming tired to comment to, you have very good journalists in Georgia, most proactive, and all the time asking us, questions about how things are moving. Again, I will connect this situation with, really with Georgian. And first of all, with Georgian society, with Georgian nation, very strong wish to join EU. And politicians need to deliver. We talked about, some kind of intermediate status and so on, with integration into economical area, but that will demand, again, very clear basic conditions, maturity of democracy and rule of law. Single market is not able to work without, rule of law in each country, which is entering single market. That's very simple. Your decisions of your courts should be trusted and respected by all other, countries which are participating in single market. And for time being, it's a big issue for Georgia. And this story with Saakashvili, we told in our first statement really that we were very much surprised by Prime Minister's comments. Then he was trying to clarify, but the comment that if Saakashvili will not behave, then there will be additional cases. Really, it shows that still this habit of politicization of justice is not over in Georgia, and that is the biggest problem. So the same is with in general with the situation. I talked during recent weeks both with opposition members and ruling party members. They are coming to Brussels, explaining their side of story, and I told to ruling party, look, you will have very simple questions to answer very soon, when politicians in Brussels will start to compare situation with Saakashvili with a situation which was happening in Ukraine during Yanukovych time with Tymoshenko. Of course, perhaps it's different story, different legal arguments, but in Brussels, the question is first of all about perception. So where that country is moving, and in post-Soviet countries, it's very easy, that that legal decisions are used not to bring justice, but to fight against opposition. And that is what we have as a very, very clear question mark. So that's my thought. And if Georgia will not be able, with the leadership of government, with the leadership of ruling party, to overcome those problems, I would not advise what they need to do, in which way they need to, to diminish politicization, and what they need to do, with all those, legal cases. But if they will not be able to overcome that situation, then really perceptions in Brussels will be not positive towards, towards Georgia, and that will damage not only Georgia, but that will damage the whole process of trio integration and so on and so on.
Thank you. I think Sophie, I hope you.
Well, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
My question was same, actually. I wanted to ask you about this statement by the Prime Minister of Georgia. What kind of message it is for you as a member of European Parliament, saying that it does not matter what the members of European parliamentarians say, with wise faces?
I do not hear in a very precise way, the words of Prime Minister, but I am not surprised, by Prime Minister reacting to some critical remarks from European Parliament. It's what politicians are sometimes doing. There is quite a popular, even in the EU, to blame everything on Brussels, and so on and so on. But I would remind again, what Tamara have said before. If you want really to go for integration, for real integration, not just, kicking the can, not just, empty statements, you need to overperform. You need to overperform. Your government, your prime minister, your ministers, your members of parliament needs to overperform to convince, to create, this positive perception inside of different institutions in Brussels and so on and so on. And that is what unfortunately, is missing for time being. I can name not only this case, I don't know why, for example, ruling party decided to abandon April 19, Charles Michel agreement. From political point of view, from this general political point of view, it was a big mistake. Charles Michel is a head of European Union. He's a head of president of Council, and he engaged personally in trying to bring, Georgia out from this political crisis. And then the ruling party is saying, "Okay, we don't need you. Go home, Charles." It's not the way how countries should look for possibility to overperform.
I think that's a really sad story, because I agree that Georgia now actually is wasting its energy and time instead of actually working on EU integration and NATO integration. We actually now embroiled in this internal crisis, which actually takes so much energy from us that sometimes we kind of don't see the bigger picture, that when there's a lot of changes inside and outside of Georgia, especially in regional politics or in European politics. And unfortunately, I don't see that there's any strategic vision either from government or from civil society how to bring Georgia back to the international radars. And this is very, I would say, unpleasant news right now. But I hope, as you mentioned, Georgia needs, not only Georgia, but together with Moldova and Ukraine, actually needs overperform, and especially Georgia, because geography is very important. Geography was the destiny of Georgia all the time. And so it means that if Ukraine and Moldova could afford some sort of, I would say, not really perform that well, there might be some different, I would say, reaction from Brussels. But in case of Georgia, which is really in remote, and we really need to be the permanent, I would say, laboratory of change. That was the main reason why Georgia was in I would say, on the attention from international, like politics and from United States, from European Union. Unfortunately, I cannot say that Georgia is managing now to stay in this path, but I hope there will be some opportunity maybe in the future to work on this. Having said that, I see that there's not, there's nobody actually who wanted to comment or to give a question. So I would now turn to Ramunas, if you would like to say a few words or to add something before we close our meeting. If there's any comments or anything you want to.
Yeah, I think we are somehow find ourselves hostages of this, as you said before, strategic obsolete. We're kind of faced obsolete situation where without compass, usually we made different statements, and we lack of this strategic patience. Let's say that, and that's where I figure out few unused potentials in the Eastern Partnership, in the Association Treaty, and in Georgia. One unused potential is geopolitics of the EU. EU is not yet there with a clear statement. The other unused potential is lack of ideas. So what we try to do, Andrius Kubilius, what he tries to do, he tries to bring up these ideas, because the power of ideas should not be underestimated. It is a powerful instrument, and it is a powerful instrument to build coalitions. Then, of course, there is a unused potential of inspiring other countries. And that is a huge argument for EU countries and EU institutions to push forward the association trio, to inspire such countries as Armenia, such countries as Belarus, because we see democratic forces of Belarus, they're really keen to be part of the association trio. And also, all the success will inspire the success of Russia in its transformation to democracy. Then there is a huge lack or unused potential of advocacy, because in Georgia we need a clear advocacy and alliances, first of all with association partners, to move forward the strategic agenda, and to push a bit EU institutions, to press us a bit to do more in the European Parliament, and also to press the member states in the Council, not speaking about the European Commission, which has the role of initiation different legislation. And then, of course, finally, I'm coming back to my very first point and your questions before. There is a huge unused potential of national unity in Georgia because of all these reasons, because these are very interrelated processes. And when you have the national unity, you have national commitment. When you have national commitment, when you have Georgia 24 strategy, then you will see how all these polarization elements will disappear gradually. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Kubilius, if you would like to make a concluding statement, what is yours?
Okay, I agree what Ramunas have said about all those unused potentials. And one potential is exactly, just in a few minutes we'll start, I need to run to AFET, to Foreign Affairs Committee, which I'm a member, and where Commissioner Vargel is coming to present 2021 enlargement package, whatever it means. As I have heard yesterday, it's extraordinary meeting from some colleagues, members of parliament are ready to be quite heavily critical in general on enlargement, policy of EU for time being. And this is, what I would call, maybe also is a potential which we need to use to push EU really with critical remarks and also with some kind of new ideas to be much more geopolitical and to overcome what Ambassador Wolfgang Kischinger was saying, this almost permanent illness of Westlessness. So we need to overcome pandemic, but also, Westlessness. And it starts from Trio, from Georgia, and from some of those efforts which we are trying to push forward. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you very much for your engagement, and I hope that there will be some time when we will try at least to overcome this crisis which we have right now in Georgia, and we will be able to work more closely on these issues. And from my side and from GFE side, I would like to thank you again, and we will try also to translate this document into Georgian to make it accessible for I would say, readers, and not only also our readers, but for Georgian citizens. So I think this is, as I said, it's very important initiative, and I hope that together with Ukrainians, Moldovans, we will do our best to stay in the European radars and beyond. Thank you very much again.
Thanks a lot, Cornelis. Thanks a lot to everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.